Hi, my name is Josh. I play a human wizard named Gator, also known as Gator Gary Golden. I also have other little pet names, but that's pillow talk. And this is the post campaign spotlight.
Well, hey, thanks for being here. And how is Gator Gary Golden doing these days? Triple G in the house.
Triple G in the house. Well, he just got back from a luxurious cruise that he himself piloted, and he doesn't want to hear any more unkind remarks from Rosa or anybody else that professes to love him.
We shan't have any uh, unfair comments made about Gator's navigating prowess. He's got nothing to prove anymore, right? He's conquered the King's Road, killed a dragon, became heir to the throne. No big deal. So my first question, same one that everyone gets asked: what was your role in the party?
My role was keeping everybody alive. That was how Gator felt about it. But in reality, um, Gator was really a generalist because being a wizard, you have this need to fill a lot of slots, giggity. But certain niches are more important to fill than others, and the fact that I went down the illusion specialty, a little personal preference of me, the player, from way back in first edition when illusionists were a proper class. Doesn't work so well when the DM stocks a lot of undead, I will mention, but it gave me a lot of really good challenges, and that's what I was looking for because I've DM'd a lot more than I've played, but I've played some really eclectic characters, so I feel like unless I was to take time to make you familiar with my base of characters, I will just say take my word for it. Gator was mild compared.
Well, let's rewind for a minute before we get
Hmm.
into all that, and let's talk about how it all began. How did you find the campaign?
You had made a Twitter post, and I had pled my case. I was very interested, being a big fan of both D&D and wrestling from about the same age. I can remember in about 1989, I had just turned 3, and I can remember some matches. I remember the roster in WWF at the time. Hogan, Savage, obviously the big guys. And at the same time, one of my older brothers he had acquired some first edition D&D books, and he decided these aren't for me and passed them right down to his next youngest brother, and here we are today.
Now, not only were you the first person to join the party, you were my first selection, right? Your application stood out as this is the right kind of person for this project. But then you
Yeah,
also helped recruit like-minded players to help form this group that we came up with. Can you
yes,
talk a
indeed.
little bit about how that went down too?
So if I recall, it was Bronson that I had brought in initially,
Yeah.
and everybody else had properly applied through social media, whatever, not necessarily just Twitter. I don't know. Um, and then, if I'm remembering correctly, you can stop me in my tracks. I believe we had the first session, me, Bronson, three other people, something like that.
Uh
Yeah,
huh.
Zinth was still there.
Yeah.
Zinth was still there.
Yes.
And I remember the others, but we won't try to get into that because time. And I think the next session or two, like we started like having drop offs. So you wanted to make sure, like like you had something special brewing. We had to have a full party. So I was like, I know some people who at least have mentioned D&D, if not, flat out said I want to play D&D. And then I brought in Saris, who played Rosa for us and was, I mean, we're all key characters, but if we're talking like key characters in a universe, a la Deadpool style, I'd say Rosa was probably that character for this universe, followed by Bronson, and then Solomon, and this is the player being completely frank. And Gator somewhere towards the bottom, whatever. But
Uh,
if you ask Gator, oh boy, if you ask Gator. Anyway,
You know, you're right about that comment. Rosa really was the glue that kept the party together, the voice of reason. But you deserve a lot of credit for bringing in players that would play a role, right? And Gator certainly played a role as well, which you so humbly played. Uh, always giving the spotlight to others throughout the campaign, and filling this. I don't want to say like a cowardly heel role, or like the comedy act of the show, but like just such a different dynamic character than everything else that was there. Um, while Gator didn't get the spotlight as much, was very, very important. And I think we saw that at the end of the campaign, the importance of Gator, although it had been bubbling under the surface, it was always there. That's how I always felt. And it was important for us to get to that ending.
We all had to get there. It wasn't going to be something where we agreed something like 8 or 10 sessions before the end. Like if one person couldn't make it, then we skipped a week or 2 weeks if need be, because things that were going down were just so important that everybody had to be there. We couldn't make calls for another person, especially because mortality exists in these universes, and to to lose someone's character for a dice roll when they're not even there, and the DM does everything they can, but you can't do everything. It's just not fair, and it's not fun. So we made the hard decision to skip weeks, and I think it paid off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's any secret that Bronson was Gator's best friend, certainly at the beginning, and I think by the end, Gator became best friends with the whole group, right? Like they became a family, really. But outside of that party, is there a favorite NPC that Gator met along the way?
Off the top of my head, hang on, because it's doing the Rolodex. It has to slow down. Hang on, I'm like slowing on somebody. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, there's too many good ones. No, it just keeps rolling. Hang on. I mean, first of all, shout outs to Noise Police and Irate Mexican for making special guest appearances and really doing what we had to do. That was fun. But as far as all the hard work you put in, because I mean, those are people I named. But as far as the people you worked on, I think Harvey Marks left an impression, just for being the hell of a guy that he was, and taking just the most savage ass beating from a younger Bronson, a younger, not as wise Bronson. He took it with a bloody smile, and we always asked about him. So I feel like Harvey Marks, from early on standpoint, made a big impression.
Yeah, it's a funny story about Harvey Marks. You're absolutely right. He was still there all the way through the end of the show, and Harvey's actually based on an actual role player in the fantasy wrestling world. Somebody who I said, "Hey, can I borrow your character for this campaign?" He said, "Sure, you do whatever you want with him." So we definitely took some liberties with Harvey, but in the end, I think he earned the respect of the party, which was cool to see, because the handler of that character is a great person as well, just constantly trying to put other people over and do and play that role. So to see that translate over and for it to work was very satisfying for me on a personal level. So thank you for saying that. I'm sure Harvey will be tickled about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, because he's the one that really stood out to begin with. Is really important. You have, like, the NPCs are really the anchors of the world. Because you can draw whatever maps you want, and all the detail, like down to like the grain on the desk of the woodwright, and but if you don't have interesting real people in a fictional world, it just falls apart and just lays there flat.
While we're on that topic, one of the first questions I asked when you were looking at joining the show was, what part of role playing do you prefer the most? Is it the social interaction, like with Harvey, or is it the exploration or the combat? And I believe you had said combat way back when. Um, Now that the campaign is over, do you still feel the same way?
Um, Combat is very different in fifth edition. Combat's very different in every edition. That's actually what I should say. And I like fifth a lot. Fifth is, in the literal ways and in the figurative ways, it's come a long way from D&D, like old Greyhawk and all that, Men and Monsters. Those days, it's come so far. It's so well refined. The only edition I personally missed was fourth, and I've heard a lot of like internal talk about that, as far as the system goes. And I always had that referred to as like the video games of D&D. Like that's the most video game,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like sort of edition. But I like fifth. We've rolled with fifth for a long time. We like the general public, and I haven't read any of the new material yet, just to be totally honest. But I currently am not interested because fifth delivers combat very well. Now, if we're talking about exploration, that's something that's handled very differently at every table.
Mm-hmm.
So all I can say is that I liked that there were lots of little things to find. And when there wasn't, you did your best.
Uh, I think that's an answer. You know,
What,
we
what else could I give you?
we there were certainly times during combat, and this is the most challenging part for me personally as the DM, where you want to get the mechanics right and logistically because you're using a battle map, like everything has to make sense for it to feel authentic. Now we're not playing a war game, so everything also has to mean something. Uh,
Mhm.
but to make it feel like you're there is essential. And by the end of the campaign, I think we really found like our groove. What the it was made clear to me what the party wants to do in combat, and it made it easier for me to present that to you guys, so that the combats were timed right, so that we cut out some of the fat, and we kept it, kept all of our sessions to a tight 2.5 hours.
It's
So
it's pretty it's pretty cool that you differentiated between war gaming, which is really its own thing. There was a split at some point. Wargaming went one way, fantasy sword and sorcery went another. Now they're two different concepts. One of them's much more rigid and detailed on like the numbers and positioning and like conditions of like the battlefield and post and like pre like combat situations. Meanwhile, D&D is it's much more fun because it doesn't have that gritty realism to it where it's like, yeah, if you make us march up this hill, we're all gonna die. It's more like, if we're all quiet enough, we could sneak in on these goblins and kill them and steal their gold. Like that doesn't sound so good in the real world, but in the fantasy world, that sounds fun.
yeah, yeah.
Meanwhile, wargaming, let's roll some dice and blow some heads off. You can edit that out if that's too extreme.
No, it's exactly what it is. There's a reason I don't play 40K. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not because I don't like the story. I like the universe that it takes place in, but the games are soulless. They
Mm-hmm.
make me feel nothing. Telling a collaborative story in the way that we did, uh, that's just so much better of an experience, in my opinion. You know.
You
So
want to know another reason why that's a very real thing is because wargaming is war. You have to be cold in war, and that's not fun when you're gaming. Gaming's supposed to be fun. You want to be warm.
a lot of time was put into building an immersive story
Mm-hmm.
for this campaign, and the players played a big part in shaping that story. Trust me, the path that was taken to get to the end is not the path that was written up in the beginning, right? The outline just got thrown out of the window, and it was like, okay, whatever you guys want to do, wherever you want to go, that's where we're going to go. So, do you feel like your choices made a big impact along the way?
That's a thinker. Hmm. I think I, I can't deny that Gator definitely had impacts here and there, but I think as the player, I wasn't I wasn't thinking like that, so maybe I just don't have like a good like recollection for like, well, here's where I was integral. Here's where, Gator really saved the day. I'm like getting flashes of things, but could you possibly provide for me and the listening audience an example?
I think that you make an astute observation because for me as a DM, it was often difficult to keep Gator involved and to make it feel like you were the star of the show at some times. So that's why there were so many characters that were interested in Gator and they were kind of being thrown your way. And it was funny to see Gator just kind of shrug off every one of these love interests that came his way, right? He was perfectly happy just being like, no, I'm good. And, that was the running joke for me. Like, let's see
Ah,
how many things we can throw at him until he finally seizes on something. And even at the end, when the crown is thrown at him, Gator's still like, I don't know if that's for me. Like, is he being humble? Is he being modest? It's hard to say, but that's what makes Gator so likable is that he was never in any of this for himself. At least it didn't seem that way. He might be in it just to survive, but in no way did he ever seem like he was a charlatan uh, that was looking to take something away from somebody else. So uh, that that was my favorite part of the character.
I think with that, Gator has no attachments because he knows things go away. He saw it when he was growing up, where he like how he grew up. He saw how easily things could come and go at a whim. And not a good whim either. He saw a lot of bad things. Things he thought were bad. When you're young, you don't have a lot of information, so you feel passionate about things. You get older, you start to examine. But in that time, that's why Gator was rash, and he went off and he joined the Navy without any permission. Really, he saw the sea as an escape and someplace that his father couldn't physically follow him. He knew he would have to raise a boat and like some forces to pursue, and it would be a big thing. So he knew he could just cut and run. He never used his background when he was in the Navy, but once he got in the Navy, as much as he loved the freedom of being on the water, Gator's not a physical labor guy, so he had to do a lot of like 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 kung fu with the chores. He had to like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Hey, would you mind? Like take it from one side and bring it to the other, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that was a major thing. Was Gator just had no attachments, and even the I don't know if it was like a thought, an offer. It's technically, I mean, usually it's a birthright, but I don't know deeply politically what was going on, so I don't know if Gator is in line for a proper coronation. And I'll be honest, even as the player, I don't know that he would take it.
Well, that's why for me as the DM, it was so easy to make that offer because it's not an easy choice for that character. Had it been another character, they would have seized the opportunity immediately. But Gator's the only one that would go, I don't know about all that. So when we get into our epilogue, it'd be interesting to see in the after story what Gator does, what path he takes from here.
Yeah,
So
I think he knows power is tempting, and with power comes responsibility, and with a crown comes duties, and duties tie you to an area, and so on and so on. And so Gator has to completely. But we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, he has no attachments, but he also changes with the wind.
yeah, there were a lot of times where he either self sabotaged or walked away, or he leaves a situation before he can be rejected or before he can fail. But there were certainly lots of challenges that were overcome throughout the campaign itself. And in those moments, if you have a favorite one, you can talk about it. How did Gator feel when they did overcome some of these foes, some of these obstacles?
Well, and just to mention one more thing, I want to tie in that you had mentioned in the previous segment about being a charlatan. Gator might be a charlatan, but his hypocrisy goes only so far. Um, any really sharp listeners will know that's a line from Tombstone. But what did you ask me?
What did it feel like for him to succeed in
It
those
felt
moments
good.
where you beat the bad guy, you slayed the dragon, you escaped in time? What does Gator feel like when he's winning?
Usually pretty full of himself. But that's most of the time anyway, which is why that's the right answer. A lot of times, even if Gator didn't say it, he was thinking, it's a good thing I'm here. Otherwise, these guys would be in some real trouble. So, full of himself and then brimming, so much so with a certain substance that his eyes should just be brown.
At any
Just so
point,
full of yes.
at any point, do you think he really faced his fears?
No, he continues to run as he always will.
Well, he certainly stepped up in moments where it was needed. Um, and sometimes you have to get by with a little help from your friends. But Gator was one of the most cerebral characters along the way, always conscious of dangers around every corner, always calculated, and it worked. And surviving the encounters that they went through is no small feat. And during that end sequence of the game in the capital, things were starting to really look hopeless for everybody. Your spell slots are running out. You get into that final confrontation with Vance McDragon. What was going through Gator's mind at the time?
By the time the dragon showed up, I think Gator had a couple of second and third level spell slots left, and that was it. So I knew whatever I was gonna cast, I had to like get the most use out of it. So concentration spell, you can't just be popping off like, okay, that one's gone. I knew when I animated those statues that was gonna be every round up until the full minute, 10 rounds. I had a counter going. Um, that was going to be fortunately like animate objects is so cool. Bonus action, and then the way fifth works, and you can use your regular action to cast another spell. And even when I was blind, I could still mentally command. And you came up on the fly with a pretty good approximation of how a blind wizard would mentally control animated objects that were firing at a huge creature outside of their blind sense range. And I think it worked pretty good. We didn't get bogged down trying to figure out like every little where did that go in this and how does that work. But you also let me ask questions, which is always good. You get, like as a 90% DM for my life, let the characters ask whatever they want. The worst thing you can say is no. The best thing you can say is yes.
Well, we definitely let you guys get away with a lot because it feels good to say yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That even when there's clearly a bad idea on the table, and I think maybe Zinthral is guilty of having some of the worst ideas. Although looking back on the ideas, funny, right? But in the time, I was like, "What? What? Okay." But instead of saying no, it's like, well, you can try. You can try to pull it off. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you used the word ideas, but I knew what you meant. Because ideas are calculated. Ideas have like rationale applied to them, but a lot of Zinths. I'm sure it was more the character because why would the player want to get the rest of the party in trouble? He didn't come off like that. he just came off like, I want my character to stand out and I want to have fun. Like, that's normal. But yeah, no, definitely the character was rash and not well, I was gonna say not what you would expect from a monk, but not all monks are perfectly centered always. That's the whole idea. Is it's a constant journey. You're always looking for that center. You're not always finding it. That's the point.
And at the beginning of the campaign, believe it or not, that was exactly the character that I wanted to cast in that role. Where you have a contender surrounded by an entourage. That contender is foolish but full of potential and needs the guidance of friends to keep them on the path. And that showed through with the character, even though it must have been frustrating for the party at times. It was exactly the story that I wanted to tell in the beginning, but we had to pivot on that hard, right? When we got to Timber Clash, and all of a sudden Zinthral's gone. Now it's, well, what do we do now? And the answer is you just blow up the whole thing and you realign. So we go from the hard way being the number one enemy in the world. They have to be brought down to the hard way is not a big deal at all. Like we have an evil cult and a disease that's killing everybody. That is what's important. We need to focus on that. And it's going to take all of us, not just one contender, to get there. You had mentioned how Gator was calculated and had been running the numbers before all of his actions. There were times where Gator flat out just broke the game, right? And either intentionally or by luck, there were encounters where Gator had the exact answer to the problem, like with the summoning of the Mephits, for instance, the smoke Mephits. Where
the Ravagers, yes, the Ravagers.
It really shut down that entire encounter, which could have been much nastier than it was. As the darkness rolls in, you light up the room and then you just own the action economy. And it was the exact thing you needed at the time. That was one of, I think, 3 occasions where that happened. So even rolling into the final encounter, it was like, well, what is Gator going to do now? What's he going to come up with? He's going to take out the big bad in one move and make him virtually ineffective, but hopefully it was satisfying.
Well, okay. Real talk. When I said I was dreaming of the statues all week, the statues I was referring to were the ones that were right next to the dragon. But as I looked closer, I was like, oh, are they blowing trumpets and not like hefting bows? Because then I had to be like, the next 2 closest, please. They were those as I seriously, as I looked, like my heart dropped and I was like, oh no, those are trumpets.
Well, I'd love to tell you that was intentional. But I think that's just a happy accident where you get a battle map, you give it to your party, and the party starts to look at all the details, thinking that I put each one of those there intentionally. When in truth, it's like, you know what, that was stock, and let's make it seem like it was intentional. It'll just work. There were lots of occasions where those sorts of things happened, and it was fun to just ad lib and go off script, and because of that, things just seemed much more organic. So I think that was a joint effort in the collaborative experience that we did together.
Speaking of collaboration, how about when I made Rosa into Super Monkey Ball?
Oh yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
there were a lot of really cool things that happened with the Iron Masters at the end there. That was a lot of fun for me. It must have been pretty nerve-wracking for the group there, but in each situation, you handled it differently, and it was really cool. It was really cool to watch. And that, the question was, does it work this way? Can we do that? And I still don't know if it works that way or not, but it was too cool to say no to. So, when in doubt, If
You figure it out.
well, if it's the rule of fun, right? If it sounds fun, then allow it.
Yeah, if it's not obviously game breaking, like I want to suddenly be able to shoot eye lasers. Like, no, that's not it. But how about I wanna charge and shoulder tackle the orc who's really near that cliff. Can we well, I don't remember what the rule is, but how about just make a strength check? Like that's the kind of stuff you can fudge just fine. But no eye laser. What are you, the vision?
I want to change gears here, and I want to talk about the King's Road.
Okay.
Um, the structure of the King's Road, collecting these badges, challenging gym leaders, very much an ode to Pokemon and the Hunger Games, all kind of wrapped into one. Uh, Tell me a little bit about how you felt about that structure and what Gator's opinion on it would be.
Um, I have to do an ask first because I didn't read Hunger Games, but I watched the movies when they came out, so that was a while ago. They were fantastic. I only remember that like kids were like basically petitioned from their families to go like survive for a chance to win good things, and it was very violent and brutal, and it was like battle royale from Japan.
Yep.
Um, which part of that was like the King's Road, though? That's the part I need. That's the bridge I need you to make for me.
Sure. Well, we're going to get into that when I do my tell-all episode, but the King's Road structure was set up to control the population, right? You give the
Mm.
entire population this false hope that they can become the next world champion. Each district is separated. You give each one an identity. You make the citizens of those districts battle each other, it, and destroy each other for an opportunity to make it to the capital, and that is very much in line with what the Hunger Games is all
Yeah,
about.
that's exactly Hunger Games. Who was Lenny Kravitz in the King's Road, though? Who was Lenny Kravitz?
It's hard to
I was
say.
so mad. No, that's spoiler. I can't say. But
Um,
I was so mad when.
and it's got to be for Gator, having seen the King's Road from all sides. It
Hmm.
it would make you understand that he would be kind of im what's the word I'm looking for here? Just
Ambiguous?
yeah, ambiguous
It
about
sounded like what you were
indifferent.
going for.
Indifferent.
Indifferent. Okay.
He's very indifferent about all of it. Very unimpressed by a lot of things, and just kind of uh, surviving, right? So for him
As
to
long as I
be,
have to live this life, I have to live this life.
yeah. So it always felt like, well, if we fail the King's Road, we'll just do something else. And that was perfectly okay because some of the other characters were taking things way too seriously. Some were on a religious quest, some were, there to conquer the world, to find family, to find their own identity. And Gator's just looking for something to get him excited. It's just an experience. Just looking for the next thing.
Trying to find shoes, man.
That's right. We talked about Harvey Marks. Are there any other moments that stand out to you as incredibly memorable about the campaign?
um. So I'm not the best off the top of the head person because I'm very much more the opposite, contemplative. Like I like don't ever ask me what I want to order for lunch for Chinese food. You should have emailed me yesterday. Um oh wow. There's a lot to go like the first session I remember very vividly because I was going for an entirely different Gator. So Gator was basically so wasted that night, without saying so in the campaign, he swore off alcohol. Except for maybe here, there, or just to be social and keep up appearances, you understand. But it was one of those times where he's like, oh, so if you get me out of this, I'll never drink again. And he meant it. That was a favorite. Because I got to act like a buffoon and then do a complete 180.
Well, let's see. Rosa and Solomon will have never have seen Gator in that state. But you're absolutely
all
right.
The better.
This was a party that was virtually vice free, aside from the violence, for the entire party. You know, no drugs, no alcohol, no touching the talent. You know, none of that. Which was
we didn't even do the juice.
No. The whole time you've got this potion in your pocket that's going to give you unreasonable strength, and you're like, no, we want to do it the honorable way.
Well, I think by the end we did forget, but I think the plan early on was, as a last ditch effort, feed Snugglecup the juice. I think that was a plan that just never came to fruition because we didn't need it by the time it would have came around.
Sure. It must have been nice to have that card up your sleeve the whole time, where it's are things bad yet? Well, we haven't juiced Snug yet, so they can't be that bad. We're not desperate.
I know Gator only rolled death saves at least one time. I think maybe there was a second time earlier on, possibly rolling death saves, but I can confirm at least by the time we were in the Capitol, there was one instance of death saves. And Gator would have not rested easy had he failed all three. He definitely would have. Well, we would have talked about it and figured that out, I guess.
Or he came back in ethereal form to haunt the party for the rest of their days.
Just carrying so many chains like Jacob Marley. Wait, Gator's not that. Gator, wait a minute. Jacob Marley was a bad man. No, Gator would not have as many chains as Jacob Marley. Maybe just a fine silver chain around his neck.
He wouldn't be like the ghost that's pranking everybody?
No, yeah, because I said Jacob Marley, and then I just went, holy crap, wait a minute, no. So y'all ever read the book? Anyway.
So we abruptly cut the end of the season right as the dragon fell. In the same way that some of these TV shows will stop the end of a season right when something happens, and then they'll pick up the next season, a couple months later. So we
not The Sopranos.
Well,
anyway.
maybe not in their final season, right? But between season 2 and season 3, there's usually like you build up to this crescendo, and then boom, you get that satisfying climax, and then you cut right there, and that's where we cut it as well. So the door is open for lots of things to happen. There are lots of unanswered questions and loose threads. Which ones are you most curious about at this point?
Did we level up after we killed the dragon?
Oh, you can have all the levels at this point.
Don't tell me that.
Because to run a level 12 campaign would be absolute murder for me.
12? We were level 9, sir.
Were you level 9?
We were level 9, sir.
They do the math, carry the 1. Yes, 9. Okay, so level 10, still equally nightmarish. Not something. I don't wish that evil on anybody. And this is maybe it's a situation where you go, you know what? Maybe it's best to leave in your prime. How many wrestlers have you seen stick around a little too long? And you're like, you know what? I liked their first run as champ, but then they came back and then had another run, and it just kind of ruined the whole image I had of this talent.
Saucy, excuse me 1 second. I got a tickle in my nose. Chris Jericho. Excuse me. Anyway, moving on. I hope that came through. I said Chris Jericho when I sneezed.
It came through loud and clear.
Yes.
There are a lot of unanswered questions here. There are characters that we visited and never returned to. There are world events that are happening and there's opportunities for each one of the parties. So if we go into a season 2, where would you want to see that story go next?
Ooh, is like see, this is the problem with like fantasy games is like I want to be like, well, how big is the world? Like that's the whole like you don't know. You're gonna like go do something if I say something. You're gonna be like, okay, that was a good idea. Let me go. Um um um. I want to fly a mecha. I want to be a Gundam. I'm just kidding. That's what people always they want to do the silliest things in D&D. Um, I would. I've always been infatuated with Ravenloft, but I feel like vampires have lost a lot of stock for what they were, and now they're too human now. It's weird. They're so human. Um, I just don't know if that same coldness of Barovia would just like I don't know. It Ravenloft is what I'm trying to say here, but I don't know. Do they even publish Ravenloft stuff anymore?
Oh yeah. Um,
Because I'm thinking like Gator. Oh man, like I could see. Sorry, now my mind is like exploding. Like because Gator might be tempted there. That's the kind of place where he might not be able to resist just because he's not strong enough.
Hopefully, there's no undead, right? Because the
That's the problem. I'd have to become like a warlock or something. I don't know, like a hexblade.
yeah. Well, that was not the answer that I was expecting, but it certainly does tickle the brain. So, uh,
Mm.
before we wrap things up here, I want to get some feedback from the player. I'm going to have you score the campaign on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the absolute worst, 10 being the absolute best ever, in a couple different categories. Okay, how would you rate
Okay.
the social interaction of the campaign?
Oh, it's fine. It was yeah. See number. I hate just giving tens, but 10, fine. 10 is fine
Let's
because
go.
that's what's one of the most important parts. And Discord is really good about facilitating. So the fact that we're all very fluent in it made it very easy. Like we didn't have to be like, here you go do this, and then like didn't we help you 9 times last week with this? Like everybody's very fluent. We've all grown up with computers. That's the one thing I meant. Like if you were to ask like, how do you feel about being online, that'd be a 0. I hate online compared to real life. I would never play online if I had the choice.
How would you rate the exploration of the game world?
Hmm. I have to give it a 5 right down the middle, but because the kind of campaign we were doing required not extensive railroading, but like exact railroading, which I don't have a problem with. Being a DM, sometimes sometimes you kids need to sit down, shut up, and we're gonna drive to Winnipeg. Or Cape Canaveral. We're going back to Winnipeg. Sorry. Anyway, Simpsons reference. Um, but it's like I said, 5. But so I understand why it was like, like we couldn't just be like, well, I wanna hire a camel and I wanna go across the desert. Like you can't do that. We're literally like going quest to quest to quest, doing badge to badge to badge. So like we were kind of like our hands were tied a little bit,
Yeah,
and your hands were tied too. So that's why it's a 5. It's a fair ranking in an like once again, hands were tied.
this was a classic MacGuffin quest.
Mm-hmm.
Go to all the places, do all the things, and then go to the end. And
Yeah, there was really no like, yeah, there was like anything that was there was just there, and it didn't have significance to the world as a whole, other than the fact that it was stock in the world.
sure. How about the combat?
Combat was fun. Um, So I don't see any reason not to give it a 10. Like, to give it a 9 just seems nitpicky. Because D&D combat's so fun. And like I said, 5th edition, like, there's a lot of streamlining, which is awesome. Because 1st edition is very much, like, initiative doesn't exist the same way in 1st edition. You do it by sides. You do it by, like, you go by, is there a surprise round? Whoever's not surprised acts first. And then initiative is rolled, but it's per side. Either then the monsters go or you go. So 5th edition makes that less restrictive, so it's more fun. So yeah, 10.
Well, I'll tell you that combat was not perfect. From this side, it was pure chaos. You should see the notepads and the marble notebooks full of just mad writings. But that's very flattering that you enjoyed it that much. Final rating here. How would you rate the overall story experience?
I feel like I should have had a faster answer for this one, given that we've done. I mean, like, post and epilogue don't count because they're not a part of the story, the whole story. They're afterthought. So you'd think I would have already come to a conclusion. And this is where I'm a professor and I'm really hard. You can't get an A out of me. You really got to try. But I'll still give you an 8, which feels like a B. Which, if I was in college, I would be so thrilled to have a B. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not telling you how to feel. I feel like that's the most fair I can be, given that we were online, which I already said, like, that takes away a lot for me. So you already had an uphill battle. So if we were in person, I would have a whole different experience. So I mean, I'd be saying different things. But I'd say if we were in person, 10. But it's because online, I'm very disconnected when it comes to online. So I have to really, really focus. Whereas, like, if I'm playing D&D and I'm at the table, like, if I can, like, sit back and just, listen to my friends talk and, like, take in what they're doing and try to, like, formulate a plan based on that. Whereas online, I feel like I'm like, oh my God, okay, close all this stuff because I don't need to hit alt tab and be distracted. And there's more overhead when you're online, so it's more pressure for me. So I feel like, can I give you an 8+?
8+. Sure.
8+, yeah.
Yeah, well, that is a post-campaign spotlight score rounded up to 8.5 stars out of 10.
Hey.
I'll take that. That is quite a compliment, considering how long we've been running this campaign, 44 episodes, and how much longer it was than what was originally anticipated, but still fun all the way through, and sad to see it end. But I think we're leaving on a high note. I'm sure it's not the end for our storytelling group, but that's going to be it for tonight. And so it's been a pleasure getting to know Gator and getting to know you as the player. And who knows, maybe again sometime down the road we'll see Gator again. So, Kuma, thank you for your time, and we'll catch up again with you sometime soon.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.